Hello again, everyone. My name is Diane Donnelly, and I am with the Donnelly group of Keller Williams Flagship of Maryland. Thank you so much for tuning in to our Facts Not Fears series, and it's a series born from questions and comments that I'm hearing in my real estate practice. This series is designed to bring timely information to you when you need it. So if you know someone who is struggling, please, please, please share this video with them so that they know what the options are available. Today, we're very fortunate to have Stephen Hamilton, who is an attorney with Emerald Bay Escrow Services right here in Owings Mills. Stephen, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. I appreciate you being here. And Stephen, we're in the midst of a very, very challenging time. I don't have to tell anybody that. Right now, some economists are saying that unemployment rate is 18 to 20%. Other economists are saying 12 to 13, but we don't know the exact number. However, we do know that it's probably the highest since the Depression. 22 million people have lost their jobs. 3 million people have been placed into forbearance already in the past month, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. People are scared. They don't know what to do. They're facing hardships. What I wanted to talk with you today about are what are their options so they find themselves unable to make their mortgage payment or preparing that they're not going to be able to make their mortgage payment. So that's where I wanted you to come in, Stephen. So if you could just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, a little about your company, and would like to hear all of these questions answered in just a few minutes.
Again, the name is Steve Hamilton. I work at a small title company and law office. My practice revolves around real estate law. I do pretty much anything in real estate law, but a lot of my practice and how I know Diane actually is I help people with what's called a short sale, which is where you sell your home for less than is owed. I'm sure we'll go much deeper into that.
Yes.
I've been doing this for, oh gosh, 7 years now. And give or take, I would say probably been involved in about 1,000 short sales. Yeah, so it's an interesting niche. But I do enjoy it because I feel like it really does, when it's all said and done, it's really nice to help struggling homeowners.
Well, for sure. And you're good at what you do. Every time we send anything over to you, you've gotten the job done. So we really appreciate that. And our goal today is to help people understand that there are options, that foreclosure is not the only option out there, that there is help before you get to that point. Stephen, in your best guess, no one knows, but in your best guess, what do you think we're in store for the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
So,
excuse me 1 second, Stephen, I must interrupt.
No problem.
This is not legal advice. We want to talk a little bit about that too, right, Stephen? We want to have a
yes,
disclosure in there.
Thank you. I put the little comment there. Nothing I say it constitutes legal advice. If you do want specific legal advice, contact an attorney. I'll give Diane all my contact information. I'll be up with the Facebook post if you want to talk to me specifically.
Excellent.
So it's an interesting question, kind of, and it's a question on everybody's mind of where we're going to go in these next 6 months. So what I did, I went back and I looked at 2008. So when that crisis hit, I pulled out a few numbers. Highest estimate for unemployment in 2009, or the highest it ever got, was about 10%. So we're already over that number in a much shorter time frame. And it's really anyone's guess, but the estimates that I'm seeing are we're at 3% now, as Diane said, in forbearance, but it's going to go to about 20% is what people are thinking. So if you take those numbers, I think nationwide, based upon that numbers with forbearances, you're looking at about 12 to 15 million delinquencies nationwide, and in Maryland specifically about 100 to 150,000.
Wow.
People going delinquent, which are crazy numbers.
Those are high numbers.
Yes.
So first, let's start with forbearance. This is a word that has been thrown around. I've already had one interview about forbearance. And this information, Stephen and I were talking before the call, changes from day to day. And usually you can look something up and say forbearance, this is how it's defined and here's how it's played out. Right now, that's not the case. So I was talking to a lender the other day, and he said that he had a client who had called their bank to say, tell me about forbearance, tell me what it's about, I want to be prepared. He decided not to do a forbearance, yet it showed up on his credit report because he just made the inquiry. Another person said that there's, it doesn't affect your credit, that as the Mortgage Bankers Association has negotiated that it's not going to affect your credit. And that is not the case either. It pulled up as a late payment and in forbearance on someone's credit. So there's not, we don't know for sure how these are going to roll out. And is it bank specific? You deal with a lot of banks, Stephen. Is it bank specific how these foreclosures or the forbearances are going to play themselves out?
The biggest indicator of how the forbearance is going to play out is who is the investor behind the loan. So if you have a loan with Wells Fargo is your servicer, typically your servicer. They're servicing that on behalf of an investor. If that investor has government backing, meaning that you have an FHA loan, you have a Fannie Mae loan, you have a Freddie Mac loan, you have a VA loan, that is going to dictate. The government has dictated how those forbearance plans will go. And that's about 70% of loans. As far as the other 30% of loans go, what I've seen so far is they're just following along with the government's recommendations. So they're servicing forbearances just like they would with a government, if it was a government-backed loan. But, sorry, Diane, are you there?
Yep. Can you see me?
Sorry. No, just grayed out. Sorry about that. But yeah, so that's going to be the biggest indicator, is who's behind the loan or who's the investor on the loan. So right now, it is my understanding that you are entitled for government-backed loans, and I think it's just going to transfer over to privately backed loans. You are entitled to 180 days of forbearance. And then after that 180 days, you can request another 180 days. But what's really important is that you call your lender and you talk to your lender specifically about what they're going to do. Now, I deal with lenders all the time and they get things wrong all the time. So you have to take what they're saying with a grain of salt, document your conversations with them, anything you send them, make sure you get confirmation they received, all of that kind of stuff. But you unfortunately have to deal with them. And to your point, Diane, with everything changing so quickly, so what happens is Congress writes the law, but implementing the law is up to government agencies, and those agencies issue interim rules as to how the law is going to be interpreted. And I've never seen them, after the CARES Act, I've never seen so many regulations fly out so fast. I mean, it's literally changing every day. And
then that's why it's so important to do these calls with industry experts, is because if we are having challenges keeping pace and understanding what the rules are from day to day, how in the world could somebody who isn't in the industry follow suit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a real estate attorney, and I think when you asked me to do this, I think I spent 5 hours last night thinking I sat down for 1 hour, and then it turned into 5.
Yeah, you time blocked 1 hour and it ended up being 5.
and then it turned into my wife coming in asking me, "What are you doing?"
I'm preparing for what I do every day of my life.
There's no sports, so why are you on the computer for so long?
Okay, so here I want to do sort of a timeline. So somebody says, just got laid off, and I need to know what I can do in order to stay in the home. So would you say how should they explore their options? What should be option number one in your expertise?
Well, option number one should be calling your lender and seeing what they have available. Unfortunately, the government has dictated how they want this to run. They've done that in the short sale process too, but it doesn't unfortunately always run that way. So you need to talk to your individual lender. Ideally, your lender will give you a single point of contact, and that's the person you should be engaging with whenever you're engaging with your bank, because that person will know who you are, they'll have a record of what it is. They're going to be dealing with so many people. What you don't want to do is just have, call in and talk to, a different person every time who has no idea. They're just looking at notes that aren't good notes, and so they're not really offering you what can be offered. So step number one is to call your lender. If your lender doesn't have a single point of contact, just make sure you get the name, identifying information of anybody that you talk to, and write that down so you can, next time you call, you can say, "Hey, I talked to Joe, Wells Fargo employee ID number 145, whatever. Joe, this is what Joe told me. So call your lender, see what they're offering.
Okay. And like you said, I've facilitated in short sales before, and the communication is not going to be anything different. So it's going to be having one point of contact, and every single call that you make, just as you said, I would have a piece of paper out in a rolling list of questions and responses back, because you're going to have to reference that. Every piece of paper goes in the same binder, because you're going to have to reference that. So keep a paper trail. You would put the name, the date, the time, the person that you talked to, and then the summary of the communication, right?
Yes, correct. And make sure you're following up as well. It might seem weird to call them every day, but you should call them every day and make sure what they're telling you, what they've said to you, if you need help, call them. The other thing, before I forget, Diane, that's really important about the forbearance is this is not forgiveness, and that needs to be abundantly clear. You are not going to, it's not like you don't owe that money. So if you owe $1,000 a month for your mortgage and you take a 6-month forbearance, come that end of that 6 months, you are going to owe the bank $6,000. And how the bank is going to deal with people who don't have that money right now is not abundantly clear to me. And quite frankly, I don't think it's clear to the banks either. I don't think anybody really knows how the dust is going to settle. So you just need to, if you have the ability to pay your mortgage, again, it's not legal advice, but saying I lost my job, I'll put it this way. If I lost my job, but I had money to pay my mortgage, I would pay my mortgage.
Okay.
I am not talking about choosing between food and your mortgage. If you're in that situation, it's an obvious choice.
Right. Hardship. There's an obvious hardship there.
Yeah. But if you have the ability to pay your mortgage, then pay your mortgage, because my big fear at the end of this is once all of these forbearances come up, they're going to be so overwhelmed with what to do that it's going to be a real issue to get that settled.
Well, if there's as many forbearances as there are, in this short time, and we anticipate that there's going to be more, I don't know how they're going to possibly keep up.
I don't either. I don't either. And it's anyone's guess. I wish, as somebody whose job it is to kind of communicate and explain things, to not be able to explain it is frustrating. But if I tried to explain it now, I would be, I would not know how to explain it.
So as your example, somebody has $1,000 mortgage payment. They are in a hardship. They have talked to the servicer, and the servicer says, yes, you can do the forbearance. It's a given for the next 6 months. You owe $6,000 at the end of the 6 months. You don't have it. This is going to happen. You simply, if you didn't have 1,000 on month 1, it's very unlikely that you're going to have 6,000 in 6 months. Then what happens?
So if I had to, my understanding is what they're going to do is they're going to make people apply for a loan modification. So let's say you don't have that $6,000, you're going to have to submit documentation and applications saying, hey, I don't have the $6,000. Here's my bank statements. Please help me out. So then they'll modify your loan. And I've heard a couple of different things of how they're thinking of modifying it. One is they'll take, if you, using our example, if you owe $1,000, what they'll do is they'll times it by 12, times it by how much? So you'll 12,000. They'll take $12,000. This is why I'm a lawyer. I'm not a math guy.
They'll divide it over 12 months.
So it's $12,000 divided by 12, and they will add that amount to every payment for the next year. So you're essentially paying back the 6 months over a 12-month period.
Okay.
The other thing that they might do is they might do what's called a partial claim. So they'll take that $6,000 and they will make you sign a new note and a new deed of trust, I think. And they'll file that deed of trust in the land records, and it just kind of sits behind your current mortgage. And when you go sell the house, you owe that $6,000. Okay. But to get to why I have some serious concerns is if they truly do it this way, where they make you apply for a modification, the amount of paperwork that's going to be coming in 6 months to these people. I mean, I honestly, I can't even imagine. I mean, think about it, 1 in 5 homeowners going on a forbearance.
Well,
So my
you
advice-
know better than anyone, Stephen, that even on a regular, on a non-COVID year, the amount of paperwork and the amount of communication, the length of time it takes to do a short sale, multiplied by 2 million people now, it blows my mind to even consider.
Yeah, it's so my advice in that respect is the minute that you go into the forbearance, you need to have the conversation with the bank as to how if you go into the forbearance and you know that you can't afford, 6 months of payments, start month 1 and talk to your bank about, hey guys, I can't afford $6,000 in 6 months. What can I do about it now?
Okay, that's
What's
good
the
advice.
paperwork you think you're going to need? What's all this stuff? So that when that flood of paperwork goes into the bank, you're at the top of the pile. Because if you're, 3 days late when they start collecting on these, you're unfortunately, the chances are you might fall through the cracks, or there's going to be so many applications. But
that's good advice.
hopefully
That's
not.
solid advice.
Yeah. So from day one, that would be my number one thing. Day one, start trying to figure that out with your lender.
Okay.
As well.
Is there an option at this point? Let's say somebody doesn't want to do a forbearance. They think they can make their mortgage payment, not in full though. They say, I can, instead of it being $1,000, I can pay $800. Is now a good time to consider contacting your bank and say, I want to modify my loan, not forbear?
It's worth contacting your bank, but that loan modification process it's a whole different animal. The forbearance process has intentionally been made, like you don't need documentation. You just can literally call your bank or fax them and say, hey, because of COVID, I have a hardship. And they're required to give you a forbearance. If you want to do a loan modification, my understanding is that the paperwork has not changed. Mm. So you are going to be, you're going to have to do bank statements, pay stubs, bank statements, pay stubs, all of the stuff that you normally do in a short sale and application. It's a lot of paperwork. It gets lost, especially in times like these when they're overwhelmed. So if you think you can make partial payments, maybe a good thing to do would be, either see if you can do the full and then deal with that, do the full mortgage payment, or maybe go into forbearance for a month while you figure that out.
So okay, good point. So if you elect to do a forbearance and something turns around and the hardship that you're experiencing goes away and you're able to continue to make your payments, you can stop that forbearance. You don't have to go for a 6-month term, correct?
It's my understanding that is how it's going to work. And I don't foresee a bank. I had not seen anything in the law that says you can't get yourself out of forbearance, number one. And then number two, I don't know why a bank would fight you on it. If you call your bank and say, hey, that money I owe you, I actually have it now. I can't imagine them saying, hey,
no thanks, keep your money.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that the banks are concerned with is just because when somebody goes into forbearance, the servicer is still on the line to make the mortgage payment. I know there's a lot of conversation now from the bank saying, I can't make all the mortgage payments. There's, all of these things coming in, they're flooding me. I can't make all of these payments. What can I do? And they start, make four months worth and we'll take the rest. So I know there's conversations about that, but that's not really germane to the call. Just knowing that though someone is paying that mortgage in your absence, right?
Yeah, I mean, the government, Fannie initially said you're on the hook for it all. They didn't even put a time limit on it. They said you owe the investor on this loan principal and interest no matter what for as long as this goes. Everybody panicked. Now they said 4 months, but according to all of the things I'm reading, it's still going to be nasty. But just for reference, in the 2009 housing crisis, about 30% of all loans were government backed. Right now, it's at 70%. Because after the crisis, nobody wanted to. Mortgage-backed securities weren't exactly a hot investment, so the government stepped in. So hopefully, now that it's government money, it'll be easier to do a bailout.
Okay, well that's good news.
They're gonna need it.
Okay, so loan modification is one thing that you may be able to try, and that's simply going to the bank and saying, I don't want to do a forbearance right now. I think I can make some of it. I may not be able to make all of it. Let's modify the loan. And that could be something as, all right, pay $800 for the next 3 months. And then the delta, that $200 delta gets tacked on at the end. Or there's different scenarios, but you just need to talk to your bank to see how they can modify to make it easier during the hardship, right? So that's basically the modification.
Yeah. And then, and this is, and I don't mean to bring new things in that we haven't talked about, but as you were talking about it, and I didn't even think about this last night, or as I was thinking about it, I don't know, let's say you go into forbearance, you have $1,000 loan, whatever. You go into forbearance, if you pay that $800, maybe it just reduces what you owe at the end of the 6 months. So at the end of that 6 months, you've been paying that $800, so $200 a month times 6. So maybe you'll just owe $1,200, and that's all you'd have to modify. That would be a conversation I would want to have too. And again, Diane, I didn't mean to. Yeah. I know we didn't talk about that, but that would certainly be something. I know, for example, as an attorney with student loans, my loans are in forbearance, but I can still make payments on them. So I don't know if that would be an option. That might be something worth exploring with somebody at your bank.
And I think, like what you said, the banks want to work with you because no one is exempt from what's going on now. And the banks are going to try to figure out ways to make it work where not everybody is going belly up. One of the things Stephen and you and I have done together at great length is our short sales. So can we talk about what a short sale is and then we'll talk a little bit about what the process of a short sale is. And this is an option where you have decided at this point you're going to sell your home, but you can't sell it for what you owe. So let's say, for example, you can sell your home for $300,000, but you owe $330,000. So if you would talk to us a little bit about a short sale, what it is, how it works, how it's looked at, those kinds of things, Stephen.
Sure. I mean, you explained it very well. I mean, it's selling your home for less than you owe. You know, there's all types of short sales. Maybe you have 2 mortgages, 1 mortgage. FHA short sales, all lending institutions offer a short sale option. I have not run into anyone that doesn't offer a short sale option. So it's typically a 3-part process. The first part is you showing the bank that you do in fact have a hardship. So this is where it's different from this forbearance. I keep harping on that, but it's different because it involves a lot of paperwork, a lot of communication. So you have to fill out an application that looks like a loan application, just in reverse. You know, what's your income? What do you spend every month? And then you write a letter saying, hey, this is my hardship. Send them pay stubs, things like that. The bank looks at that information and, based upon investor guidelines, sees if you qualify for a short sale. You know, and once they say, okay, you qualify for a short sale, the bank understands that their best option and your best option is to sell the home for as much as they can get for it. You know, they know they can't get $340,000. It's not fair market value. So they say, get us as much money as you can. Get us to 300 and we'll be good. So they'll do their own independent valuation of the property and just tell you, you know, hey, we want 300,000. So then we work with someone like Diane, a realtor, hopefully Diane, we package that all together and send it off to the bank, and then the bank will hopefully issue an approval letter, or a short sale approval letter, which says, you know, you owe 340. This contract for 300, we are going to approve you to sell. And hopefully it contains language. 98% of them that I negotiate contain language that say, we'll report this for debt settled for less than owed, and you can just walk away from that. You are going to get a 1099 on that, but on that debt forgiven, that's an important note. But the debt relief, a law earlier this year extended the ability to just not pay taxes on that.
So explain the 1099. I think that's going to throw some people. So when you say you're going to get a 1099, what does that mean to people?
Sure. Sorry. So let's say you owed 340, the bank got $300,000. You've got $40,000 of forgiven debt. when you have debt forgiven, the IRS considers it income and they issue a 1099 on that, and you would have to pay taxes on that under normal circumstances. But they've determined that a short sale is not normal circumstances, so they've given this blanket law saying if it's your principal residence, you don't owe taxes on that 1099.
And is that as a result of COVID, or is that as?
No, that was I think it
that was Obama.
with,
Didn't Obama do that?
Obama did that, and then it just keeps getting extended every year. And they always add it into weird bill. Like this year, I think it passed with the budget, so it always. But I'll never say that I guarantee you it would pass again. But if it doesn't pass again next year, I would be shocked. Just
yeah, I would be too.
What's going on. And I know nobody has that much faith in Congress, but I'm pretty sure they can at least get this done.
Get that done.
Yeah.
Is there any situation where somebody would say, no, you can't do a short sale? Any of the banks that you're negotiating, have you ever seen that happen?
Yeah. If somebody makes too much money, so the investor has guidelines as to what needs to happen in order to approve you to do the actual short sale. Some of them are very weird. Like if it's an investment property, some won't let you do it. So it's just context dependent. But if you have, I'll say this, if you have a real hardship where you cannot afford your mortgage, I've never seen anything like that decline. Mm-hmm. The biggest issue I have in negotiating short sales is that sellers understandably just become worn out. Mm-hmm. There's just, only so many times you can send pay stubs. There's only so many times you can send bank statements. On my end, I try to mitigate that, but unfortunately, it's just part of the process. But if you are suffering a real hardship, again, it would be very weird. It would be a weird situation for them to deny a short sale.
And how does a bankruptcy play into a short sale?
So it adds a layer. Number one, it puts what's called an automatic stay on the property. What that means is they can't foreclose. Essentially, they can't try to collect the debt, which includes foreclosure. So that automatic stay is in place until the case is dismissed. Number two, you need to realize that a bankruptcy will make you not personally liable for the debt. So you don't owe that money personally, but it's still a lien on your property. So you still have to, you can't declare bankruptcy and then sell free and clear of a mortgage. You still have to go through, a short sale process. What the bankruptcy does though is we have to seek court approval in order to do a short sale. And it just adds another layer. It's not a complicated layer. And I don't think I've ever seen a bankruptcy court say no to somebody doing a short sale. Because again, it's just it's in the creditor's interest, it's in the homeowner's interest, it's in the neighborhood's, it's in everybody's interest. So,
and there's no, and the name is not true to what it is. It is not a short process, right?
No.
What is the average, would you say, average time from when somebody raises the surrender flag and says, okay, I'm going to do a short sale, from the time that they get their information to you? How long does it take to negotiate a short sale on average? Everyone's completely different, I know.
Typically, let's say you, along with that information, you get me a contract, because that's the other wild card. We can't do a short sale. We can't sell it without a contract. But let's say that contract comes in at that same time. Typically, it's about 90 days.
90-day process.
Yeah, and again, though, as well, that it's also context specific to who that investor is. So Fannie Mae is actually fantastic. I can get those processed in 60 days on average. FHA, on the other hand, is terrible. Those usually I usually advise about 120 days, because you're required to go through a loan modification, et cetera, et cetera. So they've just added a bunch of layers, but typically 90 days, I would say, is going to be. In today's current climate, I'm going to say 120 though, because I honestly, I'm just having so much communication trouble with banks right now.
Well, they're going to be inundated, so I don't think that process is going to speed up.
No.
Unless they recognize there is going to be such a need for it. Let's figure out a way to streamline it and understand that when people say there's hardships, there's likely hardships. and to you know, shorten that time frame. But they're going to have to make some wild changes in order for that to speed up.
I mean, if you know, if somebody crowned me king, and I could make the rules, my ideal scenario would be this COVID, the forbearance. Hey, I have a hardship because of COVID. The bank's required to accept that. That would be my ideal situation in the short sales realm, in the loan modification realm, all of those realms, to just have that be the standard. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, maybe somebody's going to try to, I don't know how you would game the system on that, but I mean, nobody's actively trying to lose their home. So I don't see anyone really gaming that in any way.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there. I'm not even the king of my own household.
That's okay. We'll pretend you are. So to recap the short sale, if somebody says, okay, I'm not going to go through this anymore. I'm stressed out. I want to sell my house. They contact a realtor. They put their house on the market. They contact, well, the realtor will contact you or somebody to facilitate, or sometimes they do it on their own. But they would contact you. You would ask for a package of information, the hardship package. They would process all of that. We would put the house on the market. Your house would sell, and then you begin to negotiate, or you may have been negotiating the whole time, but you start to negotiate to say, okay, now we have a firm offer in our hand. What's the process from here? And then it may take 60, 90, even up to 120 days, but your house is going to be sold, right?
Yes.
Anything
Yes.
I missed on that, Stephen?
From from the time the approval letter comes in to closing, it honestly looks like a normal transaction. It's just that lead up, that extra time. So yeah, that is all accurate.
And how much does it cost for a person to do a short sale? Now, do they pay their own fees for selling the home?
No, the bank pays all fees. So if there's, there are transfer taxes, if there's seller concessions in there, if there's any, you can get certain amount of money for liens, maybe second mortgages. But no, there's nothing that you are directly responsible for. And I don't charge sellers anything. I've
So
set up
a person could expect that if they did a short sale, they could sell it without paying any money out of pocket.
Correct. The only thing that you have to be aware of is there might be indirect water bills, things like
HOA fees have to be
HOA
paid.
fees, that kind of thing. Exactly.
Okay.
But in terms of all of the closing costs, those are covered by the bank.
Okay. And then the last thing, which we hope doesn't happen, it will. We're going to see some foreclosures, but everything that we do is to keep people in their home, to find ways and alternatives so that people can stay in their home. In the unfortunate circumstance that they can't, and they haven't done a short sale or taken any of the alternatives or weren't able to for whatever reason, and they go into foreclosure or forbearance. I keep mixing up these two words. If they don't do the forbearance and they go into foreclosure, what is that process?
So what happens is the bank, they go through the courthouse, they do the process. It generally takes about 9 months to get through the entire process in Maryland, because there's certain things you have to be served with, certain notices, that kind of thing. So once that time period is done, the house goes to an auction. And the auction's on the county courthouse steps. There's a bid for the property. If the bank doesn't get what they want, in terms of those bids, they'll take the property back and it becomes a real estate owned property, or somebody bids and gets title to your property. The important thing to remember is, unfortunately, Maryland is a deficiency state. So in Maryland, let's say you owe $100,000 and your house sells for $80,000. There's a $20,000 deficiency there. The bank has 3 years from the date of they have 3 years to come after you for that money. So they can sue you for $20,000. The only ways to stop that are bankruptcy. So that's the real downside of a foreclosure, and the real upside of a short sale is you get to avoid that deficiency. Not all banks pursue those deficiencies, but they do have the option. So
why would somebody do a foreclosure versus exploring the short sale?
On a couple things, if they're in bankruptcy, but the main reason is they're just done with it. They just
Too much. It was just
it's just too
overwhelming.
much, and they're just too frustrated. And you have to remember, all the people who are doing this have a hardship. They got other stuff going on in their life.
Yeah, they're
They
stressed
might have a sick spouse. They might, unfortunately, somebody might have passed away. You've lost your job. I mean, it just builds and it builds. And they say, you know what? I'm done.
Done.
Yeah, take this from me. When I'm handling that, it's not something that's very common. In the thousands of short sales, I've had maybe 1 or 2 people do that. But I have seen it because it's inherently frustrating dealing with large banks.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all of the short sales that you've done and you've handled them. We had a really hard one recently that took some time, and it was very frustrating because it was slow to get the documentation when it was needed. And it's funny because when we're dealing with these short sales, we say, okay, bank, here's all the documentation. They take 2 weeks to get to review it, and they say we reviewed it within 24 hours. Get it back to me. So you've got a window of 24 hours to get them something, and so you have taken a lot of the frustration out for our sellers. So we appreciate that from you.
Yeah, it's some of the things are just head scratching. If
I don't know how you do it. I can't even imagine doing what you do.
It's only for the ending. That's the funny thing, is this the whole thing lasts 90 days, and it's miserable for 90 days, but the payoff
And that one day.
Yeah, that one closing, the seller who calls me afterward and just is like, so
They're very
done.
appreciative.
So in the end, it's worth it. But sometimes you do have some questions in the interim. But,
Getting there.
yeah.
So for the people who are listening in, do we have any questions that you would want to ask in terms of hardships, ways to avoid foreclosure, short sales, loan modifications, forbearance, pros, cons, etc.? Anything that comes up that you guys want to ask? I think you have answered a lot of questions here.
We were that thorough, Diane.
Yeah, thank you. You were so thorough. Okay, so Stephen, if there's somebody out there who needs some information, needs some direction from somebody local, you're in Owings Mills, they just want to have some conversation with you, where should they reach out?
You can call, and my telephone number, I would advise calling. It's 443-522-9868, and just ask for me. If you don't have a question about specifically a short sale, which is what I handle, I would be more than happy to talk to you about anything else. I do this line of work because, I do like to help people. And I would say that 2 out of every 3 conversations that I have, with people, short sales, not, I think there's something better that they might, or they don't even need it, so I don't mind helping out with, don't think I can't, because if your question's not about a short sale, don't think you can't call.
Awesome. Well, we certainly appreciate that. And Stephen, thank you so much for being on the call today. And hopefully we're able to do great things and help people to avoid foreclosure and stay in their home through this process and for the next 6 to 12 months as we go through some repercussions of the COVID virus.
I thank you for having me. I mean this sincerely. I think it's very important to have these conversations because, as you said at the very beginning, we're both in this industry and we're both kind of scratching our heads as to what's going to happen here.
Yep. Well, I appreciate it, Stephen. Together we will make things happen. And thank you to everybody for listening in. And tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we are going to have Tara Frame on, who is going to talk about estate planning, what you need, what you should have in place, etc. So bring any questions that you might have to that, and we'll see you tomorrow at 3. Thanks, everyone.